Let's bring in Sal Paolantonio, ESPN's national correspondent, NFL reporter. Good morning, Sal. How are you?
Good morning, Dan. I hope you and yours are doing well.
I think we are.
All right.
McLevin, give Sal the poll question.
Okay, would you rather be 2-14 and know that you're going to get Trevor Lawrence next season, or be 9-7 or 10-6 and sneak in with a last wild card spot?
I always like to go to the playoffs. If I'm a fan of a football team, get me into the postseason. You never know what could happen. There have been so many wild card teams that won Super Bowls, and the draft is a crapshoot. So I'm going with get me in on a wild card.
Explain to me the Patriots in primetime, Sal. I get Tom in Tampa, but the Patriots are in primetime 5 times. What are we going to be watching with the Patriots in primetime?
2 words: Bob Kraft cutaway shot in the super box. I mean, come on, Dan. Come on. That's what it's all about. Bill Bel. Listen, here's what we want to know about the NFL in 2020. Can Tom Brady win without Bill Belichick? Can Bill Belichick win without Tom Brady? That's it. Period. Paragraph. End of story. That's what I'm looking for. To me, the greatest Super Bowl ever will be Belichick versus Brady at the Little Sombrero in Tampa. To me, that's the greatest possible matchup. And I'd like to see both of them succeed independent of one another. I think it's a great, great story. I really do.
Well, I get the Buccaneers because that's new. We've seen the Patriots, and outside of New England, I don't think people tune in to watch them. There's a San Antonio Spurs feel to them where you go, wonderful, a dynasty, just not, big market sports. And I think that's I'm tuning in to see Jarrett Stidham this year. I mean, I am. I don't know. Julian Edelman at the end of his career. I mean, Sony Michel, but they're in primetime 5 times. I think maybe that they have them there so people can watch to see if they lose. I don't know any other reason.
Well, I'll take the counter argument, Dan. I think people want to see whether Belichick can say to the rest of the world, you know what? I can beat them with Steedham. That's it.
But I don't have to watch them. I can read about that the next day. So, come on.
That is true. That is true.
If I said the top 5 must-see teams this year, who's number 1 on that list? Given Kansas City, the Ravens, you got Brady in Tampa?
I think it's the Buccaneers. I think it's Brady and the Buccaneers, 1 and 1A. I think people want to see if Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes can get back. It's so hard to go back. And they have all the pieces still in place. And they're healthy, knock on wood. So I think it would have to be Buccaneers and Chiefs. And then we want to see if Lamar Jackson can win a postseason game. I mean, that's important. And they had, in my view, they had the best draft in the NFL. The best. I think their first 2 picks were both first rounders. They're going to make them instantly better. And I think the Ravens are going to be tough.
You start to look at this and we feel like we've got the season already figured out in May, and there's a lot that happens. We don't know. There's always 3 or 4 teams that are better than what we think, and there are 3 or 4 teams that are worse than what we think. If I said, give me 2 teams that are going to surprise being better, 2 teams that will surprise by being worse than what we think, who would you pick?
All right, let's go with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Mike Tomlin's got it figured out.
Mm-hmm.
And that team's going to be better than we think. I think Big Ben coming back from the elbow surgery, they're going to be good. They're going to make the playoffs in Pittsburgh. They have Minkah Fitzpatrick, who, in my view, Defensive Player of the Year candidate without a doubt.
Okay.
So they're going to be better for sure. I think the Jets are going to be better than we think. I think the Jets are a team that could put it all together very quickly under Sam Darnold and with Adam Gase. I think they have no choice, but I think they'll be better than we think in the AFC. I think worse than we think. Wow, that's a tough one. I'm going to go with Arizona Cardinals will get worse before they will get better. I think it's going to be tough for them to get better, and I think people wanted to see them get better instantly, but I think they'll be worse. I think the Houston Texans. I think the Houston Texans will take a step back.
I'm trying to figure out this Cowboys situation because I loved the Cowboys last year. Loved them. The only question mark I had was coaching. Were they going to take the next step? Now you got Mike McCarthy in there, but I don't have Dak Prescott in there. We don't have off-season workouts. I just don't know if they hit the ground running. Are you bullish on the Cowboys this year?
Everything that they do, Dan, is based on intricate chemistry on their offensive line. And they're going to have a few pieces, that they're going to have to move around. And it's very difficult always in NFL training camps, especially now this year, because you're not going to be able to practice as much. We don't know how or when they're going to get on the football field in the summer. The Cowboys offensive line drives that football team. And if they don't have their act together, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I'm just curious about it because it feels like they have, I don't know if they really address their defense, but it feels like, and it's a copycat league. I don't know if we're looking at trying to copycat Kansas City or the Ravens. Do you think those are the two teams that we're trying to look at and go, we either have a track team or we have a quarterback who's able to beat you with his arm and legs?
Well, I think Dak Prescott is more like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes than Andy Dalton. That's for sure. I think Andy Dalton is more built to do what Mike McCarthy wants as opposed to what Dak Prescott wants to do. So, we're playing option football in the National Football League. Yeah. That's why the Eagles draft Jalen Hurts. We're playing option football. The quarterback has to be able to throw on the run and run. That's the way it's working out. Patrick Mahomes II, and I like to say Patrick Mahomes II because that's his actual name, and he also happens to be twice as good as everybody else on the football field. I watched him late in the season with those 3 comeback wins. He basically won a Super Bowl for Andy Reid. You and I can agree on that. Reid didn't win the Super Bowl. Mahomes won the Super Bowl. Mahomes won it because there were instances where he was able to improvise in the second half, and the defenses he was playing were static and couldn't improvise with him. That, to me, is what it's all about in the National Football League. But the difference between Mahomes and Jackson is Mahomes right now is a much more accomplished passer. When Jackson gets there, Jackson will be as good as Mahomes. Deshaun Watson's already there. And that's, to me, is why I don't understand why you trade DeAndre Hopkins. I think you give him all the money that he needs because, to me, Watson's already there. But without Hopkins, he's going to take a step back.
Talking to Sal Paolantonio, the national correspondent for ESPN covering the NFL. What's the coolest thing in your office there?
Oh, wow. I have a great collection I like to read about history and history of music. So I have a great collection of books. I've got probably every book written about the Beatles and pretty much every book written about World War II. It's an eclectic difference. I understand. But, Belichick's got all those books about football. I've got all the books about John, Paul, George, and Ringo.
If somebody says the Beatles aren't the greatest band of all time, your response, Sal Paolantonio, would be?
Take a hike. You can't have Mrs. Paolantonio's raviolis in my house on Sunday.
Well, we had this conversation. McLovin will occasionally bring up that the Beatles are overrated, and then he knows that it makes me mad, and then it becomes this discussion that we spent about an hour a couple of days ago on the Beatles and their greatness. But McLovin, for some reason, thinks that the Beatles are overrated.
Well, in terms of orchestration and musicianship, they're much better than the Stones. They have 27 #1 hits, and there's no such thing as Breakfast with the Stones.
I think the Stones are the greatest rock and roll band of all time. I just think the Beatles, the Beatles don't even get on the list of greatest bands of all time. Like you start with maybe the Stones or Zeppelin or who. Beatles they're Muhammad Ali. They're in their own category. Yeah. You don't rank them. That's the tribute.
John and Paul were like Mozart and Beethoven and Rodgers and Hammerstein. I mean, that to me is where you make the comparison. I made the pitch to the Centennial Committee of the Hall of Fame, and I said, this is the reason why we put Steve Sable in
Yeah.
with his father, Ed Sable.
Yeah.
Because Ed and Steve Sable were like Rodgers and Hammerstein, John and Paul. They're like Belichick and Brady. They made beautiful music together.
But Sal,
And,
help me understand this with what the Sables did in archival footage. Why did we get to 1982 to start keeping track of sacks?
I know.
Why? I want to know what Deacon Jones had. I want to know what some of these other, the fearsome foursome, some of these great defensive lines, great defensive players, they're not part of history because they're not up on the sack list there. And I think it's unfair to them.
It's definitely something we got to look at. No question
You're
about
there
it.
at NFL Films, Sal. Can't you just go in there one night and just start looking at footage there? Come on.
I do, Dan, but it's not at sacks. I look at the quarterbacks. I'm a quarterback guy.
Tell me what Joe Burrow's in for this year, in your opinion.
He's in for a hard road, because of the defenses that he's going to play, specifically in that division. The Browns have talent on defense, and they're going to be much more aggressive than they were last year because of the change in the coaching staff. The Ravens have tremendous talent on defense. And we already talked about Minkah Fitzpatrick and the way that Steelers defense is constructed. So within his division, he's going to struggle really mightily.
And it's not a coincidence when you see quarterbacks go to teams, they go later in the draft, they have more success because you don't have to be the star. You can sit for a little while. This helped Mahomes. Deshaun Watson, there's a little bit of a grace period. Joe Burrow does not get a grace period here. Tua's going to get a grace period because of his hip, but it won't last long here, and you're going to teams that they were in that position for a reason. They weren't very good. If you were handicapping, though, with these quarterbacks, 3 years down the road, who has had more success among the quarterbacks drafted this year?
I think it's going to be Tua if he stays healthy. No question about it. One, we're playing option football in the NFL. He can move and he can throw on the run very, very well. Two, the AFC East is not as tough perennially as the AFC North. And I think that will be a major difference.
So it's great to talk to you, and hopefully we'll get back to whatever normalcy is. It's the new abnormal, I call it, because there's going to be nothing normal about this. But it's always great to talk to you. I hope you're doing well.
Hey, stay safe, stay healthy. Talk to you soon, Dan. Thanks for having me on the show.
That's Sal Paolantonio from the Mothership.